Okay. So everybody, welcome to Tech Tuesday number 4. Today we're going to talk about FemTech. Legal disclaimer, this is not legal advice. Important note, the session is being recorded. The discussion at the end will not be recorded. I'm reminding you the goal is not to go in depth. How much in depth can I go in 15 minutes? But rather to inspire people to have a new outlook and raise questions. And most important, of course, is to hear experiences of other people. And if anybody wants to be a speaker at a future Tech Tuesday, please let me know. The format, as before, is 5 minutes talking about some technology, 10 minutes talking about the problems or solutions that are specific to IP, 10 minutes feedback from the audience, and 5 minutes overflow. Okay, FemTech. The reason I chose FemTech is because I think it's an application-focused field. What does that mean? It means in FemTech, usually, not always, but usually an existing technology is applied to problems relating to female needs, anatomy, physiology, and preferences. And what that means is that we should be looking at the application. The actual technologies involved can be a very wide range. There can be AI, mechanical, electronic, software, imaging, user interface, materials, pharma. I've actually written patents in all of these for FemTech. And one of the common ones is taking an existing product and merely modifying it for FemTech. So you might think it's an existing product. As a patent attorney in general, there's a protection strategy or perhaps process where we first ask, what do I want to protect? And then we ask how, what IP tool will I actually use to protect it? And I think FemTech is a great example of a place where you really have to ask yourself what here is interesting. And not always does it automatically tell you how it is you're going to protect it. So here are a few interesting things about FemTech. Often it bridges or is an intersection between health, wellness, and quality of life. So some of it is how to be healthier, some of it is how to be well, and some of it is how to enjoy life more. Now, this affects what the regulatory environment looks like, and it affects what the marketing will look like. And all of the other things I'll talk about, of course, also affect the technology, but as an IP person, what I'm trying to say is you should be asking yourself, how does the interaction between this FemTech, particular item of FemTech, and let's say regulation or marketing affect how it is I'm going to protect it? And maybe we'll give an example later. FemTech is really a market on its own, but a big part of the market is undeveloped and definitely underserved, which means that there's a lot of work on the marketing side to get in, and we want to use IP to help that happen. It often relates to emotionally sensitive matters, and I'm using the word personal and also the word intimate. They mean different things, and they affect the design of the product or service differently. And of course, that's something we would want to protect. And also as a field, there's a very big diversity of products, and even in the same product, there's a lot of diversity. And the reason why this happens is because anything having to do with reproduction is highly evolved from a biological perspective. It's deep inside of us. And also, we have a lot of culture around it, and that means that there's going to be a lot of important details regarding the product in order to make it happen. So here are a few examples of FemTech products: an application or a device for tracking fertility, a device for preventing urinary incontinence, which is especially a problem in women, especially if they gave birth, a breast implant, a medication protocol for menopause symptoms, a device or app for tracking pregnancy wellness and fetal tracking, treatment of uterine bleeding, gynecological surgery systems, devices for help deal with different types of sexual dysfunction, devices or apps to help tune the hormones. A lot of the FemTech side is affected by hormonal cycles. IVF processes starting in the body and continuing in the lab. The flip side, birth control, various types of cosmetic technology, which have to do with particular preferences of women on what should happen on female organs. So all of these are examples of FemTech, and there are many, many more examples. But this just gives you some feeling for how broad the scope is when I use the word FemTech. What I have here is a list of some IP concerns and also opportunities. The concern meaning that when we think about the IP, we should be asking ourselves, how do I deal with this problem? And an opportunity because you say, oh, this could be a way by which I get a useful protection. So first, data collection. If we're talking about devices that are personal, we want them to be personalized. We need to know which data for that user. If we're talking about devices that have to do with private needs that people don't talk about, how are we going to know what it is that people need? We're going to have to collect data. Collecting data which is subjective from a random group of people is not easy. So you can definitely file IP on the right way to collect the data. But on the other hand, who does the data belong to? You collect the data, you used it to generate a device, you have to make sure that you're actually allowed to use that data. That is also an IP concern. Many of the inventions in FemTech, the products, have an important psychological or emotional side. Okay, if you have a product which empowers the user, that's a psychological effect. How do you protect a psychological effect? How do you protect those parts of the product which give you a positive emotional response? First, you have to identify them, of course. One of the important things to remember, though, that your end user is often not going to be looking at maximizing money. Okay, if the end user wants to get pregnant, the question isn't how many dollars will it cost me per 10% increase in probability of having a baby. That is not going to be the calculation. So when you ask yourself which features are important to protect, it's probably not going to be looking at money and probably will not even be an objective utility. When we talk about marketing, so in FemTech, a lot of the market doesn't exist yet or practically doesn't exist. If you want to succeed, you have to be able to market your product. You have to be able to grow. A lot of fields in FemTech don't have a standard way of doing it. And of course, we don't want a competitor to steal our marketing methods. What means you have to identify them and protect them. It also means you should be asking yourself, what are the adjacent markets that I want to protect as well? Many FemTech products are used at home, or even if they're used at a clinic, we want to use them at home. But you can't sue, it's not practical to sue the end user. So again, finding the right place to put your IP protection is important and difficult. If we're talking about a device which is wellness or medical, let's take, for example, a device for reducing PMS. Is that medical or is that wellness? Well, if you want to get an FDA approval, it's going to be medical. But if you're going to make it into a wellness device, you might not need to get approval, But you always have to ask yourself, what is my company going to do? Choose one, but your competition is going to choose the other. So your IP has to cover both possibilities. And remember that some patent offices will allow more protection for medical or for wellness, depending on the exact situation. Many FemTech technologies are personal and designed for long-term use. Long-term is not days or weeks, we're talking about years. One of your concerns is that you're going to build up a set of clients and somebody will come and steal these clients. So the question is, what systems are you going to have in place to prevent client theft? And of course, what IP will you have in order to help prevent client theft? Like other medical device technologies, you want to partner with regulatory issues. Unlike there, you have the issue of HMOs, which are not always sure if they want to pay for treatment which is not necessarily yet defined as medical. You also have rituals and you have traditions. And if you latch onto a tradition, for example, some parts of the world, women do not use tampons. That means that certain types of devices are more likely to be used and other devices are less likely to be used. That opens an opportunity to file a more limited patent, but which still blocks you in that part of the world. And last but not least, a lot of times the sale of the device is secret. Nobody knows about it. Nobody knows about it. How are you going to know that somebody's infringing? That's an IP concern. Here's some things that you should do, I believe. One, consider all aspects of the life cycle, especially the onboarding. In 5 years, I might give you a different answer, but right now, the question of how do you convince a user to use your device is important. The user interface is critical because of the personal and intimate side of the device. So we have to talk about the data interface, how you give data, the physical interface, if it actually touches the body, and the functional interface, how does the function of the device interact with the function of what you're doing? Collecting and processing data, you should probably protect. Maybe you're going to protect it as a trade secret. Maybe you'll do it, on some server on the internet. You should try to always cover both home and clinic use and both health and wellness uses. You should look to the end evolved product. Okay, this is a product which is going to evolve. And when it evolves, it's going to look different, and that's what we want to protect. And of course, everybody's going to want to do follow-on sales. If you have a user which is using your product once a month or 3 days every month, that's a great marketing opportunity for selling other products. You want to protect that. That's where the money is. Whatever involves a user and empowers a user right now is very important. You need to consider that right now there's a lot of push, but the push is coming from what I call first users, people that are really excited about FemTech, but most of the users are what we would call mass users, and the value that they give the features is different. And remember that when we try to protect, we want to protect what people are going to use, so it might be different features. And yeah, sometimes the basic technology itself is indeed special. So you have to ask yourself, what does the adjacent market look like? Last but not least, designs are important and trademarks also very important. I'm mentioning it because patent attorneys sometimes focus on technology. Animate a short list of things perhaps not to do, and it's difficult, to generalize on all types of FemTech, but obviously if you ignore the issue of data ownership and protection, that's bad. You should not focus on the technology only. You should definitely focus on the application and the marketing. In particular, you should think about the effects of the Fem on the tech. How is the tech being done differently because of the Fem? There's probably interesting stuff happening there. you should consider the users rather than true believers. And I'm pointing out specifically the lean startup methodology, where you take a user and you put him inside your company and you ask the user questions and you keep on getting feedback. And by the time you're done, you might have a great product, but only for a true believer, and it won't be a product for mass users. When you consider the feature value, you have to think about the user preferences. Remember, it's not just about utility, definitely not medical utility. Usually, you will not have a single magic feature that gives all the value, so you shouldn't look to have just one. Since your product is going to continue developing over time, you should not stop the IP portfolio development as soon as it's finalized. Because the market, some of them don't exist yet. When you think about planning and budgeting, especially of IP, realize that you should not look at time to market, but time to sizable market. How long will it take for the market to be big? You have reputation, it has to be managed, and they're incumbents, and they can definitely be stodgy and backwards, but they do have distribution in the market, so you should not ignore them and what they might do. Okay, this is what I had to say about FemTech in my short period of time. I am stopping the recording now.